In just 9 minutes, Jasmine Crockett slammed a crumpled grocery receipt on the desk and peeled the skin off Trump's America First lie. Gasps echoed. The cameras zoomed. His smirk cracked like shattered glass. 4.2 million Americans went hungry, and Trump called it strategy. But when Jasmine pulled out the pen, what did she make him sign that had the whole country frozen in silence? The red tally light blinked once, then locked solid. Live. The camera rails slid across the marble like loaded rifles. Inside room 226 of the Oversight Committee, the air was sharp enough to cut. The hearing was officially titled, "The Economic Impact of Domestic Trade Policies." But no one came for the title. They came for the man in the middle, President Donald J. Trump, flanked by his legal team, arms folded, chin up like he was back on stage at a rally, not a federal hearing under oath. His lapel pin shimmered. His face didn't, because he knew this wasn't his crowd. Not this time. Then came Jasmine Crockett. She didn't burst in. She didn't strut. She walked in like truth walks in when it's done waiting. Calm, controlled, dressed in charcoal gray, no flash, no spectacle. Just a woman with a storm in her spine. In her hand, not a thick binder, not a legal folder, just a single white envelope. She took her seat like she belonged there more than anyone. Didn't look at Trump, didn't need to, because Trump looked at her. His eyes tracked that envelope like it might explode, and in a way, it would. The chairman cleared his throat. This committee will now come to order. Someone coughed. Someone else leaned forward. Trump shifted in his chair. The smirk flickered, but never settled. Here and then, right before the first question was asked, a voice rolled over the room. Not through speakers, but through America's conscience. Sometimes revolutions don't begin with fire. They begin with milk, eggs, and dignity. What was in that envelope that made the most powerful man in the country stop breathing for half a second? Jasmine didn't lift her head. She simply opened the envelope. A folded grocery receipt, creased, slightly yellowed, unfolded like a quiet scream. No theatrics, no drumroll. Just a pause that made even the tech crew hold their breath. Eggs, she said, reading slowly. $3.21. Milk, $5.18. Bread, $2.90. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was steady, measured. Like every word carried the weight of someone else's hunger. She paused, then raised her eyes to the president. These same items were $3.42 cheaper, just last year. A chuckle slipped from Trump's lips, dismissive, casual, the kind meant to belittle. But Jasmine didn't even blink. She turned to the screen behind her and clicked a small black remote. The lights dimmed. A massive digital map of the United States filled the screen, pulsing with red dots like open wounds. Each dot, a county. Each pulse, a food bank reporting spikes in demand. Each signal, a family cutting meals because their groceries are no longer affordable. Jasmine let the silence speak for her. Then she said it, quietly but with enough force to stop hearts in mid-beat. That 342 isn't just inflation, it's impact on 4.2 million American families. No one moved, not even the aides scrolling their phones. Trump leaned back, arms crossed, but the smirk was gone. Because somehow, a tiny number on a crumpled piece of paper had just lit the fuse in a room full of power. And the real question now wasn't if something was about to explode. It was, how deep does the damage go when even breakfast is political? Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just pressed play. On the screen behind her, an old video flickered to life. Footage from a White House press briefing 4 years ago. Trump stood at the podium, arms wide, voice booming like he was preaching gospel. Tariffs won't impact American families. Not even a little. The audio echoed through the hearing room like a ghost refusing to die. A few gasps, some murmurs. Someone shifted in their seat. Trump leaned forward, grinning. Fake news, he said, almost laughing. That clip is taken out of context. Grocery prices have nothing to do with me. Jasmine turned toward him slowly. Not angry, just clear. Then who raised them, sir? She asked. The milk fairy. Trump's grin twitched, just for a second. The room didn't laugh. It didn't need to. Jasmine kept going. Who made Patricia Miller, The retired nurse from Tulsa, choose between insulin and eggs. She tapped the receipt still lying on her desk. Who made James Harlow, the soybean farmer from Iowa, sell his truck just to keep lights on? Trump shifted again, jaw clenched, no words. Jasmine clicked again. The screen changed. Chart after chart, showing spikes in grocery prices directly tied to tariff implementation dates. Real data, real consequences, and at the top corner of every slide, a White House signature. The same one now sitting 20 feet away. And just like that, the weight of $3.42 wasn't random anymore. It was traceable, personal, presidential. So now the question wasn't whether Trump lied. It was, what happens when the most powerful man in America made the poorest pay the price, then pretended it never happened? While the hearing room held its breath, miles away in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a 71-year-old woman sat on the edge of her twin bed, eyes locked on the television screen. Her name was Patricia Miller, retired nurse, widow, mother of two, and now survivor of a silent war she never signed up for. The C-SPAN logo flickered in the corner. Jasmine Crockett's voice filled the room like a thread of dignity stretched across distance. Patricia clutched a spiral notebook, where she'd been tracking prices for the past year. Not out of habit, out of necessity, she turned the latest page. Eggs, $3.21. Milk, $5.18. Bread, $2.90. She circled them all in red ink, the kind she used when a patient was in critical condition. She used to save lives. Now she was saving coupons. At the store 2 nights ago, she stood in aisle 5 for nearly 12 minutes. Her blood pressure meds were $38.96. A half cart of groceries was $41.10. The numbers didn't lie, but they didn't care either. She bought the groceries, skipped the pills. Again. As Trump scoffed on screen, calling price spikes fake news, Patricia whispered under her breath, barely loud enough for the television to hear her pain. I never missed a day of work, and now I can't afford bread. The camera at the hearing caught Jasmine glancing down at the receipt again, Patricia's receipt, a crumpled proof that policy isn't just politics, it's pain. Real, gnawing, kitchen table pain. She didn't want pity, she wanted the truth to land. Echten, to hit someone, anyone, with the weight it had crushed her with. And if a president could raise the price of survival with one policy, could a nurse's receipt bring it crashing back down? Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She just lifted the remote again. The room dimmed. The projector whirred. And then it appeared. The map. Not of nations, not of battle zones. Of counties, hundreds, thousands. Each one glowing red. Not for danger. For desperation. The heat map bled across the United States like a slow-burning fire. No borders. No politics. Just pain. Every red dot pulsing on the screen marked a county where food banks reported historic spikes in demand. The pattern wasn't random. It was national, rural and urban, red states and blue, no one untouched. Jasmine stepped forward, her voice steady but not cold. These aren't it numbers, she said. They're stories. Families. Veterans skipping meals so their grandkids can eat. Single mothers watering down soup. Factory workers lining up at food banks in uniforms they still wear from the shift. She paused, looked directly at Trump. This is not foreign aggression. This is internal neglect, wrapped in red, white, and blue. For a second, just one, Trump didn't blink. Jasmine pointed toward the red clusters spreading across the Midwest, the South, Appalachia. She didn't say the word, but the implication was deafening. These were his voters. His base, his America. A chart popped up beside the map. Demand for food assistance, up 38%. Grocery inflation, trailing behind tariff timelines like a shadow that never lets go. Jasmine turned back to the committee. When patriotic slogans cost people their dinner, we haven't protected our country. We've hollowed it out from the inside. And the map kept pulsing, heartbeat after heartbeat, like the nation itself was trying to say something. But if this was the sound of America's stomachs rumbling, who in power ever truly listened? Trump leaned into the mic, clearing his throat like he'd been waiting for this moment all morning. His voice cut across the chamber, sharp, theatrical, dripping with defiance. This was necessary sacrifice, he said, for national pride, for American strength. The words hit like metal scraping glass. Jasmine didn't respond right away. She stood still, hands flat on the table, jaw tight. The room seemed to tilt. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was tension waiting to snap. Then she lifted her eyes and spoke. "Why is it," she said, voice low but cracking with heat, "always the poor who bleed, so the rich can stand taller?" No one moved. The air froze. Even the cameras stopped zooming, like they were afraid to interrupt something sacred. Jasmine stepped away from the table and walked toward the center screen, still showing the glowing map of red. Her heels echoed with every step, louder than any voice. Because when a billionaire calls it strategy, a janitor calls it skipping lunch. She pointed to a county in Kentucky. To him, it's a chess move. To her, it's an eviction notice. She turned slowly, locking eyes with Trump. "You raised a flag with one hand and picked the pockets of working families with the other." Trump tried to interject, but nothing came. Just breath, just static. Because for the first time, he looked small in the chair that once made him feel untouchable. Jasmine walked back to her seat. The silence was deafening. The betrayal wasn't in the numbers. It was in who had to live them. And if patriotism comes at the cost of insulin, rent, and dinner, how many more homes have to starve before we stop calling it love for country? Jasmine didn't announce what was coming. She didn't preface it with outrage or statistics. She simply opened a folded letter. Its creases worn, its ink slightly faded. Her voice, when it broke the silence, was lower than before. Slower, like she was holding something fragile enough to shatter the room. "This was written 11 days before James Harlow took his own life," she said. "Soybean farmer, father, Vietnam vet, age 62. The committee shifted. Trump leaned back, eyes narrowing. But Jasmine didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead and read, "I didn't lose my farm. Your policies did. I survived a war, cancer, and 2 floods, but I couldn't survive you. My harvest wasn't worthless. You made it worthless when you taxed my seed, raised my fuel, and erased my buyers. I asked for a hand up. You sent a press release. Tell the next man who votes for you. Plant hope, not soy, because pride doesn't put food on the table, and it damn sure doesn't pay the bank." She stopped. No sound. Not even from the gallery. That's when the camera cut to his daughter, seated in the back, hands clasped tight in her lap, eyes locked on Trump like a fire behind glass. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her presence screamed louder than any headline. Trump's gaze flicked toward her, then quickly away. Jasmine folded the letter gently, like laying someone to rest. "He died believing no one in power ever read these words," she said. "Today, Mr. President, at your shot now you have." And as the silence thickened into something sacred, something brutal, something unbearably real, the question hung in the air like dust in a sunbeam. How many James Harlows does it take before truth becomes louder than pride? Before the silence could settle from James Harlow's letter, Jasmine reached beneath her desk and pulled out something thicker than a folder, heavier than a statement, a giant printed check. She stood, walked to the center of the room, and slammed it flat on the witness table, face up. The sound cracked like a gavel. People flinched. $3.5 million, she said. "That's what this company got." The room shifted. Phones lifted. Screens zoomed. Printed across the check. Midland Global Meats, Inquern, recipient of emergency tariff relief funds. Same quarter James Harlow's bank foreclosed on his land. Jasmine's voice sharpened, words slicing like steel. While James was being buried in Iowa, Midland was tripling executive bonuses and flying to Aspen. She looked at the president. "And the man who made that possible just so happens to be sitting 20 feet from me." Trump didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the check, then to the cameras, then back to the floor. Jasmine circled the check with her fingertip. Slow, deliberate. "This isn't capitalism. This is cruelty wrapped in a flag and called patriotism." The crowd murmured. Someone in the gallery audibly gasped. The sound echoed like a church pew cracking. Jasmine pointed to the memo line of the check, marked "Agricultural Relief, approved by executive order." She didn't need to say the name. It was already branded on the paper. Trump's initials, his policy, his war, and standing right there was the bill. Jasmine stepped back, letting the check speak for itself. James Harlow asked for help, she said. They sent it to a meat empire instead. And the question now wasn't about money. It was about morals. How much blood can a check carry before it stops being called relief and starts being called betrayal? Jasmine didn't flinch. She reached beneath her desk, pulled out a thick roll of paper, and walked to the front of the chamber. With a swift motion, she unrolled it across the witness table. The heat map again, counties burning red like open wounds. But this time, there was something new. Across the top, bold and undeniable, President Donald J. Trump. Every pulse of hunger, every spike in food bank lines, every dot of pain, Aaron now wore his name. Gasps moved through the room like a wave breaking in slow motion. Trump stiffened. His eyes narrowed. But the smirk from earlier? Gone. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She pulled a black pen from her pocket, held it for a beat, then slid it across the table. Stop right in front of him. Sign it, she said softly. Own it. These are your numbers. Trump didn't move. He stared at the map like it might bite. The cameras leaned in. America leaned in. 38 million people were watching, and not a single one blinked. And then from the back row of the gallery, a man slowly rose. His voice cut through the silence, calm, but trembling. You shook my hand in Ohio, Mr. President. The room turned. Trump looked up, squinting. You looked me in the eye at the rally in Akron. You said you'd protect American jobs. He held up a worn photo. Trump standing beside him in a hard hat and factory vest. That job died the day you signed that tariff, and so did my pension. The man sat back down, leaving only the photo behind on the ledge. The image was undeniable. Jasmine didn't stop. You wrote the policy. You signed the checks. You made the promises. This map? It's not opinion. It's aftermath. Trump's jaw tightened. He glanced at his attorneys. One whispered, but he didn't answer. He reached toward the pen, then pulled his hand back. Jasmine took one small step forward. Calm, centered, unshakable. If you were proud of what this represents, Mr. President, you'd be signing it in gold. He pushed the pen away, and that was enough, because in that moment, the silence spoke louder than any signature. What happens, when the map of American pain carries your name, and the whole country sees you refuse to claim it? The map still lay on the table, Trump's name stretched across the pane. But Jasmine wasn't done. She turned toward the gallery and gave a small nod. A man rose slowly from the third row, back straight, chest out, jacket worn thin from years, not months. His name was Calvin Morris, Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star, 2 tours, 4 decades working warehouse floors. Now retired, if you could call it that. When he stepped to the microphone with a quiet dignity that made the entire room go still. I'm not here to complain, he began. I'm here to testify. His voice was raspy but steady, the kind that held weight without volume. I fought for this country. I bled for it. Hey, no, but this country, he paused, jaw tight, eyes glassy, didn't fight for my refrigerator. A hush fell like a curtain. I live on $1,131 a month. That used to mean something. Now it means I pick between cold milk or heat in winter. Don't tell me about national pride when I got a microwave tap water to take my medicine. No one moved. No one dared to. Trump shifted slightly, but Calvin didn't look his way. He was speaking to the country now. To serve and starve in the same lifetime, that's not sacrifice. That's betrayal. Then something happened that wasn't on any schedule, wasn't in any rule book. Applause broke out, soft at first, then rising, from staffers, from press, from the public rows lining the chamber. Even a few members of the committee joined in. Jasmine stood beside Calvin, eyes never leaving his. Because sometimes truth doesn't roar. It limps to the mic and says just enough to make power flinch. And when a war hero says his fridge is empty, what excuse does a billionaire have left? Trump sat forward, elbows on the table, voice laced with defiance. I'm still the people's president, he said, loud enough for the cameras, like he was trying to drown out the applause that still lingered for Calvin Morris. The room tensed. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't match his volume. She didn't need to. She clicked the remote one more time. The screen behind her shifted again, this time to numbers. Stark, black and white. No emotion, just proof. A national poll, large font, big headline. 78% of low-income Americans blame tariffs for the spike in food prices. Red states, blue states, every demographic. One voice. Jasmine stepped forward, slow and surgical. You say you're the people's president. Then why are the people starving under your policies? Trump opened his mouth, but she kept going. They didn't ask for a trade war. They asked for groceries. She turned slightly toward the committee, then back to him. You gave them a war. They wanted dinner. The line landed like a slap. Trump stiffened. No more smirks. Just the slow realization that the story, had slipped out of his hands. Jasmine's voice didn't rise. But it cut. You weaponized pride. You monetized pain. And now the receipts are rolling in. Behind her, the map stayed frozen on the screen. Trump's name still etched across the hunger. He looked down. Jasmine looked up, because in that moment, one truth became louder than all his slogans. A man can't claim the people when he's too afraid to face their empty plates. Jasmine didn't look at Trump anymore. She turned her body toward the cameras. Not the committee, not the president, America. The chamber fell into stillness, like the air itself was waiting. Her voice dropped, low and steady. If your grocery receipt went up $3.42 this year, she said, ask yourself, who paid for whose war? Her words didn't echo. They landed, heavy, clean, unmistakable. No statistics, no policy talk. Just the truth dressed in numbers the whole country had felt in their hands. She let the silence stretch, let it sting, because she knew who was watching. It wasn't just pundits and press. It was the single mom in Ohio staring at the screen from her couch, the veteran in Mississippi skipping dinner to afford gas, the grandmother in Nevada cutting pills in half to make them last the week. This wasn't about tariffs anymore. It was about trust. Jasmine placed the crumpled receipt back on the table, softly like a flag folded at a funeral. And then, still facing the camera, she said it. Clear, sharp, almost whispering. You didn't ask for this fight. You didn't declare this war. But you've been paying for it. Every day at checkout. Trump sat frozen. Not a sound from his bench. Not a word from his mouth. Because the battle was no longer in the room. It was now in the homes of every American who'd ever skipped a meal and blamed themselves. And how much longer? Will the working poor pay for the powerful man's pride? It started with one email, then 3, then hundreds. By dawn, Jasmine's inbox had collapsed under the weight of over 60,000 messages. Subject lines screaming in all caps. You spoke for me. We feel it too. Thank you. Retirees wrote in from Florida, counting cents on prescription bottles. Single moms from Milwaukee sent photos of half-empty fridges. A veteran from Arizona wrote simply, finally, someone said it out loud. Her staff couldn't keep up. The phones rang nonstop. Aides sat on the floor with laptops, scrolling through testimonies so raw they made interns cry. And then came the videos. Clips filled social media like wildfire. People from every state, every race, every walk of life, holding their grocery receipts up to their webcams like evidence in a national trial. Some shaky hand, some tearful eyes, some voices trembling. Others, furious, firm, unapologetic. A woman in Kentucky held up a crumpled receipt, said, here's my $3.42. You want it back, Mr. President? A man in Detroit slammed his on the table. This is what betrayal costs at Kroger. The hashtag #My342 exploded overnight. It climbed past sports, past celebrity news, past politics. It wasn't a moment anymore. It was a movement. Jasmine didn't post. She didn't speak. She just watched. Because this wasn't her voice now. It was millions of Americans who had stayed quiet too long. And now, because of a crumpled receipt, a red map, and one unshakable question, they found each other. And when pain turns into unity, who says the powerless can't make the powerful tremble? By the next morning, the Capitol felt different. Not louder, just heavier. The hearing wasn't just news. It was a reckoning. and the noise outside these walls had grown too loud to ignore. Every major outlet led with the same headline: My 342, the receipts that broke Washington. Under mounting pressure, the Oversight Committee reconvened in emergency session. Staffers whispered, phones lit up. Emails came in by the minute, constituents demanding answers, not excuses. It didn't matter what side of the aisle they were on anymore. Democrats, Republicans, Independents. For the first time in years, something cracked through the gridlock. Shame. That afternoon, the committee voted. Unanimous. Bipartisan, historic. They would launch a full-scale investigation into the misuse of tariff funds and their direct impact on American households. At the center of it, appointed by acclamation, Jasmine Crockett, chairwoman. She didn't celebrate. She nodded once, eyes focused, voice steady. This isn't vengeance, she said. This is accountability. Somewhere across town, the news broke live during a Fox News segment. Trump, seated under studio lights, froze mid-sentence as the anchor announced her new title. He clenched his jaw, ripped off the mic, and walked out. No speech. No spin. Just the sound of a studio door slamming shut. The footage aired nationwide. No one needed narration, because now the woman with the envelope had the gavel. And the red dots on that map, they weren't fading. They were organizing. And for the first time in years, Washington was listening not to power, but to pain. The kitchen was quiet, the kind of quiet only morning brings, before the world starts asking for anything. Patricia Miller stood barefoot on cool linoleum, staring at the same fridge she'd opened thousands of times. But this morning, it wasn't about food. It was about truth. She took the crumpled grocery receipt from the counter, the one Jasmine had held up before the entire country. She smoothed it gently, pressed it flat against the fridge door, and pinned it with a magnet shaped like a faded apple. Then she reached for a sheet of torn notebook paper and a black Sharpie. 4 words, bold, all caps, no apology, never again invisible. Outside, the wind shifted. A soft knock broke the stillness. Patricia turned, and in the doorway stood Jasmine Crockett. No suit, no cameras. Just Jasmine, holding a small bouquet and a thank you that didn't need saying. They didn't speak at first. Didn't need to. The hug between them was long, tight, and full of everything they both knew. Jasmine stepped inside, glanced at the fridge, and saw the message. Her eyes softened. She nodded once, like she was saluting something sacred. They sat at the small table, sipping tea that had steeped too long. No press, no sound bites, just 2 women, quiet and steady, holding the kind of silence only truth can create. Patricia didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt like a voice, a spark. And as the camera slowly pulled away, the voiceover returned. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. They tried to bury her truth beneath numbers, but she planted it in every kitchen in America. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs the right moment. When those who were once unseen rise together, even the most powerful must take notice. If a single receipt can spark change, what's waiting for you to speak up? If the story moved you, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to First Shock, where truth isn't filtered and real voices matter. Tap the bell, because the next fight might be yours. Did you feel it? In the receipt, the silence, the fridge with nothing left? Drop your comment below, because someone else out there needs to know they're not alone. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.